The day of reckoning is upon me. Um, it's been a long time coming. About 2 months is how long it's taken me from engine pull to here. Yeah, about maybe a little less than 2 months, which I guess is pretty fast for um, someone who doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't have a garage. But um, I am very hope. I know I say this a lot in the beginning of videos. Hey, I'm doing this today and tomorrow, and usually it's hey 2 weeks later. But I am hopeful that today we are going to crank this and break in the cam, assuming all goes well. So I'm about 90% confident it's going to run well. I'm about 50% confident it's not going to leak, just because things leak. So hopefully nothing leaks. And if it does leak, hopefully it's an easy fix and not something I would have to take multiple things off to fix. But that's part of it. I'd rather do that out of the truck than in the truck. So as you can tell, I've got it on this Summit Racing engine cradle thing. Um, I am trying to do a little bit more off camera to make these videos a little shorter and digestible, especially when it's random things like, putting plugs in and all the stuff like that. So I got a lot done. Right now, what I have left to do is get the spark plugs in, get the headers on, put oil in it, and prime it. I'm gonna have to build. I'm gonna build a little makeshift stand for the radiator, and I'm probably gonna use the original radiator just for the test fire. Um, we'll see. So just a bunch of random things like that aren't step by step. Hey, A B C D. They're kind of stop start stop start. So I'll probably record a lot of it on time lapse just to show the progress, but I'm not gonna do a lot of stopping and talking because it's at this point it's fairly self-explanatory. Just putting in spark plugs, putting on the water pump. I got to put in the barbs here for the fuel pump. Uh, Once I get to the point where I'm prepping it to fire, I'll stop and talk through what I'm trying to do. But until then, I'm just gonna record it on time lapse and get things done as quick as I can, because the more I talk, the less I work. So yeah, and it's supposed to be nice most of the day, but there's a couple of dark clouds like right over my house, and then there's blue sky everywhere. So I'm under here. Eventually, once those pass, which should be in another probably 45 minutes, I'm gonna wheel it out there, put the headers on, uh, and get it closer to the point of firing it off. I'm very nervous because this is not a budget build. It's not like a race engine, but it is. I mean, it's not a little bit of money. And I wouldn't have done this unless it was my grandfather's truck. If this was some random truck I bought, I would have gone way cheaper on a lot of the stuff. I would have thrown the original crankshaft back in it, and all the things that I didn't break myself that were just whatever. I would have probably run it. I would have probably used the original balancer, the original timing cover, all those kind of things. Probably would have made it work, but because this is such a special truck to me and my family, I spent money on it. So, which is great if I don't blow it up. So if I blow it up, um, then that's going to be a little more heartbreaking, just because of A, it's money and time that is taken away from my family, and B, I'm gonna have to fix it eventually, whether it's sooner or later. But we're gonna be positive. We're gonna assume everything goes great. I've done everything pretty much by the book. There's a couple things that I'm worried about just because it's an old engine and things didn't go back perfect, but I did the best. And I know these engines have a little bit of tolerance like that. They're really good engines to kind of this to be the first engine, a small block 350. So I'm hopeful that there's enough give for it to work and not just, absolutely catastrophically fail. So I'm going to dig into it. I've been working all morning to get to this point, and then I wanted to stop and start this video and do a little recap. So yeah, I've already put the starter on. I put the flex plate on, and I plugged up all these holes that I'm not using right now. I plugged these off. So I'm gonna keep going. The last thing I'm gonna do is put the carb on, prime it, yada yada yada, and go from there. So I'm gonna dig into it and get this thing cranked today. So let's do it. So obviously it is not the same day, but as things have typically gone for this project and for me, I hit some roadblocks. Nothing super crazy, but ran out of time Saturday, and then didn't get started until late Sunday. And so instead of rush it and do something stupid, I decided to just take today off and get this thing cranked and broken in. Just nothing crazy happened, but small things like, for example, the headers, the passenger side barely fit on the stand, and the driver side was hitting the stand, so that wouldn't work. I tried to put on the stock headers, but all the bolts that I had that would fit those were super corroded, and I didn't want to strip out the aluminum heads. So I'm just going to run it open and be careful. It's going to be, and I'm probably going to have to wear ear protection because it's going to be incredibly loud. But for a break-in, it should be fine. And just things I didn't think about, like I'm going to have to rig up a run stand wiring and all that stuff. So instead of force it, I wanted to take my time. Tomorrow is actually my grandfather's 91st birthday. So it might be a pretty cool birthday present to be able to show him, hey, I got this cranked, pretty much right before your birthday. So we'll see if it happens. Part of me may also be procrastinating because this is the most important part of the process, and I'm afraid something could go wrong, but it's got to happen. So it's gonna be confident in what I've done and go for it. So quick recap this morning. It's actually really cool this morning, which is awesome. So I'm gonna try and take advantage of that. But before I hook up my contraption to this thing to get it started, I want to take a minute to appreciate how the engine looks, because once I fire it, and it's going to start getting dirty, so it'll never be this pretty again. And so just going to appreciate it for a minute and then keep working and get my stand set up, and you're going to be super impressed about the stand, I promise you. So going to keep working this morning and keep moving and get this thing broken in. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, what is that? And where can I buy one? Well, this is one of one, I'm afraid. And I think it will work. So this is my attempt to not spend a lot of money on a run stand. But I mean, a lot of the things I had to buy are things that I was going to have to buy eventually when I put it in the truck. But man, things add up. After the fourth trip to the store in the same day, the O'Reilly's guy asked me if he wanted to come help. I told him, no, I got it. So we're at the point where I got to prime the carb with some fuel in the bowls and light it. But before I do that, I'm going to do a walk around and I'm going to show how I wired this up. I could not find a decent video. Maybe I didn't dig hard enough, but I could not find a decent video on bare bones wiring to do this, and probably because it's a bad idea. But I don't have a run stand. I'm not going to fabricate one out of metal, at least. Obviously, I made one, but I'm going to do a walk around and show how I wired it, because that was probably the most complicated thing for me that it was hard for me to grasp. I mean, I can turn bolts, I can put things where they need to go, but when it comes to electricity, I'm not all there. So I'm going to do a quick walk around and point out some things. And then I'm incredibly nervous, but I have to fire this thing, and it's going to happen in about 20 minutes. So let's do a walk around, and I'll point out some things I'm kind of concerned about, or things that I think might go wrong while it's running. Things I'm going to kind of watch out for, and yeah, let's go from there. So as I mentioned, I am running this without the headers, which is going to be loud, very loud, extremely loud. So I'm going to have to wear ear protection, which is kind of sucks because I want to be able to hear the engine, which I will be able to hear it, but you know what I mean? Like I want to be able to make sure I hear any knocks or ticks or warbles or whatever. So I routed all my cables around the back here as best I could and kept them below the exhaust. And I got this little tie here to kind of keep them a little closer together so they don't walk back into the flex plate back here. Same over here. So I've got all those wired up in the right firing order. So as far as wiring goes, so you've got on the starter here. So you got the positive to the battery over here. And then from that same terminal, focus, this wire from that terminal goes over to, don't be jealous, my ignition switch. It goes to let me tell you wrong here. It goes to here. Okay? So here's my ignition. This is on. Okay? And then from here on the ignition switch, and these are all just little spade connectors that I had in a little kit, and I'll show those in a second. That runs to the distributor and goes to the battery on the distributor. And that's also a spade connection, and I'll show that as well. I had a bunch of those just laying around. So then what you do is you connect your push button start, which I bought both of these at O'Reilly. These are both 20 amp. And so it goes from a little circle connector there, and it taps into the power from the battery. And then that other wire that's connected to the push button start runs back over to the small terminal on the starter. Then I've got my ground. I sanded this part of the block and cleaned it off, and that goes to the ground on the battery. So that's about as simple as you can do it. I have a mechanical fuel gauge that I've hooked up back here to the block where, you know, the sending unit would go. I did not hook up a temperature gauge, which is the only thing that's a little dicey about this. However, I am going to leave the cap loose and keep an eye on it. So if it starts to boil out, then I know it's too hot and I need to cut it and let it cool down before I go back. So I got to run this for about 20 minutes to break in the cam. It doesn't have to be 20 consecutive minutes, as long as it's 20 minutes at 2,500-ish RPMs. So if I cut it off, that's fine. But if I cut it off at 10 minutes, when I crank it, it's got to go right back to 2,500 RPMs, and it's got to stay there for at least another 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop procrastinating. Ask me questions about that in the comments in terms of wiring, especially if it works and you want to figure that out. Just let me know. But I'm going to stop procrastinating. I'm going to prime the carb and I'm going to fire it up. So let's do it. All right. Ready? All right. Okay. All right. So timing was off, and I just tested it and I fired it and it went, but I think the RPMs are a little too high. So I'm going to back it off a little bit. back it off a little bit, and I think my water pump is leaking, which is fine. But all right, I'm gonna leave this over here. What time is it? 2:25. 2:25. So I have to run until 2:45. Okay. I got my tachometer in my pocket. It's coolant. So I figured that was going to happen. Good news, bad news. The good news is it's not leaking from any of the really bad spots that are bad news leaks. The bad news is exactly as I predicted, this piece of crap gasket on the valve cover leaked immediately. This one is not leaking. So before I crank it again, I'm gonna go get another valve cover or a valve cover gasket and fix that, because I don't want oil. I don't want to cause a fire, essentially. And I've got to figure out a way to prevent my radiator from spewing everywhere. I don't know if that means my water pump is leaking too. Awesome. I don't understand how that's leaking though. But the great news is it runs, and I didn't spin a bearing. I don't have any crazy leaks at the timing cover. I just have some water leaks, which are fixable. And I have an oil leak at the valve cover, which is, I knew that was going to happen. Oh, I have a little leak back here, actually. Golly, this valve cover gasket is poo-poo caca. Okay, I'm going to fix this and try again. All right, it's a few days, week later. And quick update. I bought a new water pump, and so my morning has been essentially that. I had to get a new plug for the top of the water pump. I had to get new studs for the water pump, and of course that was 2 or 3 trips to O'Reilly because I didn't think about it. And if you haven't noticed by now, or you haven't heard me say it, I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing. So the engine was overheating pretty quickly, and one, I didn't have this tent up, which I got out specifically to put up, but I just got so excited that I forgot to put it up. 2, I didn't replace the water pump, and I replaced everything else. 3, I was using the old radiator, which is full of sludge, and I did that just because it was in the back of the truck and it was quick. I had a new radiator and I didn't plug it up, so I'm hoping that was the problem. I'm hoping that, and I mean, I didn't have the fan right up against the radiator either, but I think the old water pump, the old radiator, and the fans not being right on the radiator was just a bunch of factors that went against me. So hopefully the overheating and water pump issue is resolved. I have a feeling I'm still going to have issues with leaks. I mean, it's leaking, and it's leaking from these ports, and it's not even running. Um, so my goal is to ignore these leaks for the break-in, as long as it's not like gushing out, because I've got to run this engine for at least another 11 minutes to break in this cam. So the goal is to do that, and if it's leaking oil and it's not bad, I'm just going to let it leak and let it run. And then I pretty much made the decision that I'm going to return these or sell these Edelbrock, these stamped steel valve covers, because they're poo poo caca. I didn't even really know much about valve covers. I didn't even know there was cast aluminum, which is apparently the much better option. Um, so I'm probably going to go with those, since they're not that much more expensive, and they won't bend and warp around the edges here. They're a lot thicker around the sealing edge. So I think that will solve my problem. So fingers crossed that it doesn't overheat, that the oil leak isn't just absolutely terrible, um, and that I can let it run for about 11 minutes and break in this cam, and nothing else happens. So we're gonna see what happens, and hopefully get this done. Let's see. All right, so there's a couple of things that I think was the things I know I'm doing wrong, but I wanted to, like I said, that the goal of this is to learn from my mistakes, so you don't make my mistakes. So this fan, I mean, this box fan is just not enough to keep up with the engine. However, it should be enough to break it in. But I have not been tightening down the radiator cap, because I think I read or saw it on a YouTube video where basically if you don't have a temperature gauge hooked up, the boiling will let you know, hey, it's too hot. Well, it also boils. Did some research. It boils at a lower temperature without pressure, and it will pretty much always boil if you don't have the cap on, which makes sense. I mean, it's a pressurized unit of heat, steam, blah blah blah. So I did what I should have done in the beginning, and I got a mechanical temperature gauge, and I stuck it straight in the top of the water neck, and now there's no question what the temperature is. So I can keep track of it, and I can watch it. I've got the thermostat, or I've got the cap on tight. I've got the overflow plugged in. I filled it all the way up right to the neck. It's about 70% water, and the rest of it is 50-50 coolant, or excuse me, not 50-50, just conventional green. So anyways, so now I'm going to try it again, and at this point I need to let the engine run for at least another 9 minutes, 8 minutes. So if I have to do that in spurts, then that's how it's going to be, but I've got to get this done today. The valve covers they're weeping. I wouldn't say they are leaking, but not nearly as bad as they were. So that's a win for the break-in. I'm still going to replace them with some like cast aluminum valve covers, and then get rid of these, and that way there's never a question, like they're solid, bam, they're on there. So yeah, all in all, even though this is frustrating, like I said, it's running great. Nothing's leaking anywhere else that's more better. It's just the valve covers and the heat, and I think the heat is it's on a stand. It's hot out here, and the box fan just can't keep up. So I'm about to run it again with the temperature gauge in there. Hopefully that doesn't leak. It shouldn't leak. I put Teflon paste on it, but it's a cheapo gauge, so we'll see. So we're gonna run it, watch it, time it, go from there. All right, so unfortunately, as I recorded the end of this video, my mic died, and so all of the dialogue I had is unavailable. So I'm just going to record a quick recap of everything and some updates from when I finished. So I was having problems with the valve covers. So the valves, excuse me, I was having problems with leaks at the valve cover, and I had those really simple stamped valve covers, and I decided to upgrade to the die cast ones and a nicer gasket, which has helped tremendously. Is not leaking anymore, which is great. There is oil where the head meets the block, and I've kind of come back and got a lot of it off. There's still some there, but I'm pretty confident that that's just stuck in that seam right there, but from when it ran down, because I can't get it all out, because I just ran it again for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I cleaned this side pretty good, and there's a little oil here, but it's not like, I think it's heating up, and it's just kind of coming out from being under that head. But the valve cover's not leaking anymore. Leaks are gone. It sounds great. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it really quick and let it idle so you can hear the cam. Timing's a little off, but it's good enough that it'll run. So overall, man, phase 2 is done. Engine is rebuilt. The cam is broken in successfully. It was terrifying, but it's possible for you to do it in your driveway with a 6x6 and a cheap engine cradle. So that wraps up for this one, and I'll end it with a little bit of idling. Enjoy.